11 people have been hospitalized after an individual took part in a knife attack. It all started when the suspect in the Ohio State University area attacked individuals by ramming his car into a group of pedestrians before using a butcher knife to cut several people. Now, luckily, no one has died as a result of this attack. However, 11 people were hospitalized. A suspect has been shot and reported deceased. Victim injuries include stab wounds, injury by motor vehicle, and other injuries that are being evaluated. Now, what we know so far about the suspect was that he was a Somali refugee, but he was a U.S. citizen.
No, he's a legal permanent resident.
Oh, he's a legal permanent resident. Sorry, I read citizen, but that might be wrong. And he also was very upset at the university for not making Muslim prayer more, I guess, available or accessible. Yeah, so he needs to pray 5 times a day, and apparently it was difficult for him to do so on that campus.
So this is unfortunately a right-wing dream come true. So luckily nobody got hurt. I'm not implying that the right wing wants people to get hurt, okay? But he is an immigrant. He's Muslim.
He's a refugee.
He's a refugee. Well, I guess, yeah. And he came over from Somalia, and he didn't use a gun. It's perfect for them, right? Now, again, I'm not implying that they're happy about it. Nobody's happy about these people getting hurt. What we're all super happy about is that nobody got killed. One guy's in critical condition, 11 in the hospital, but only one in critical condition, and he hasn't passed away. Thank God, okay? So, but let's talk about this in context. So, number one, in the beginning, there was 2 different kinds of things that I was seeing in the media and in social media, okay? Number one was, what happened? Ohio State is supposed to be a gun-free zone because they thought there was an active shooter. Well, it was a gun-free zone, and he didn't have a gun. And if he had had a gun, a lot more people would have died. And so the reason it got so much attention in the beginning, they didn't even know who the attacker was in the beginning. That's point number 2 that I'll get to in a second. So it wasn't because he was Muslim. No, not at all. Ohio State's the biggest college in America, 65,000 people in Ohio State. So, and it's a campus shooting that everybody gets worked up. It turns out it was the cops' gunfire that people heard, and that's why they thought it was an active shooter. So all those guys saying, you see gun-free zones don't work. Well, it wasn't a gun. In Virginia Tech, we had 32 killed when the guy did have a gun, 17 wounded. In Orlando, we had 49 killed and 53 wounded. You know why? Because guns kill people much more effectively than knives do. So it's not like you can't kill a person with a knife, but you can kill less people. You can injure less people.
It's a lot more difficult to stab someone to death as opposed to just shoot them to death.
Yes.
So that's a fact. We know that.
The only silver lining here was that he didn't have a gun. If he had had a gun, so many more people would have died. There's just no question about that. Okay, now, in terms of his ethnicity, before we had any inkling that he was Muslim, I saw it referred in the press and the media as, oh, he's probably just a garden variety lunatic. Garden variety. Okay. Now that we know he's Muslim, we're looking into terror-related activities. Okay, but wait a minute. We just had a guy, Scott Michael Green, in Iowa, ambush and assassinate 2 cops. He had a political manifesto, basically, as to why he did it. He didn't like that cops limited his speech at some football games, and he was carrying a Confederate flag and all that stuff. He's a right-winger. Are we looking into whether that's terrorism-related? No, we're not looking into it. So do we have any, if they find out that this guy went and got trained by ISIS, then I'm 1,000% with you. It's terrorism, and et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, it doesn't change any of the things that happen. The things that happen are terrible no matter what label you put on it, right? But if he's a guy who has absolutely nothing to do with terrorism, except he's an idiot who's like, oh my God, they won't let me peacefully pray, so I'll kill people. Yeah, that guy is unhinged and totally hypocritical and doesn't understand how much damage he's doing both to the people that he has attacked, which is the most important, and secondly to his own community. Because now the Somali students in Ohio State are scared to death. of how people are going to react to them.
Of course.
Because when it's a right-winger who does it, nobody goes out and attacks other right-wingers. It's not a thing that happens. But if it's a Muslim student that did it, a Somali student that did it, an immigrant that did it, well, then all immigrants, all Muslims, all Somalis have to watch out because there'll be assumptions made about their group.
I want to get to a point where we're not obsessed with labeling, the attacker. We're not obsessed with labeling the suspect. And we actually come up with some plausible solutions to it because this kind of stuff does keep happening, right? And so if you go in the Trump direction and you just ban Muslims from entering the country, that still doesn't solve homegrown terrorism. I mean, the San Bernardino attackers weren't immigrants, right? They were born and raised in the United States.
The wife was an immigrant, to be fair.
Oh, the wife was an immigrant.
The shooter himself was a citizen.
So he's a citizen.
And Orlando was a citizen. And Orlando he was Muslim, but he was closeted gay, and he was pissed about a breakup he had with other folks at that club.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. Once you're a Muslim, that's why you did it.
So what's the solution? Like that's what I want to know, right? As soon as we get past like the finger pointing at Muslims versus right-wing white people and this, like, what are we going to do? Are we just going to like keep arguing about what to label it, or are we going to come up with solutions?
Well, luckily, Trump is willing to call it by its name, and I hear from the right wing, once you have a president who's willing to call it by its name, it magically goes away. So in 2 months, once he calls it radical Islamic terrorism, poof, gone. I had a cab driver, who's Egyptian, by the way, Coptic Christian Egyptian, and he's got a heavy accent. He's an immigrant. He says Trump was Jesus 2.0. He's Jesus' second coming. And I'm like, you're kidding, right? That's a joke, right? We're in New York. You're an Egyptian immigrant. Like, no, I'm not. He's like, what do you mean? He was offended. He's like, of course I'm not joking. He's going to save us all.
Okay, well, I mean, maybe he's right. And
maybe he's right, yeah. Okay, knock on wood. Let's hope so, Go get him, big guy. No, in reality, one thing that is most important immediately for our safety is less guns equals less deaths. So in this case, he didn't have a gun. Nobody died. Thank God. If he had a gun, would 10 die, 30 die? I don't know. But a lot of people would be dead right now. All those people are alive because this idiot, this jerk, this whatever, any statement you want to put on him, radical Islamic guy, I don't care what you call him. Thank God he didn't have a gun.
Yeah.
So that's the first solution. But they won't agree to that. They won't agree to that. They don't care if it's a right-winger with a gun. They don't care if it's a Muslim with a gun. They don't care if it's a lunatic with a gun. You got to have the gun. You got to have the gun. Okay, well then,
They also support people on the terror watch list from having guns.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, that's number one. Number two is a cultural answer. And by the cultural answer, I don't mean an attack on one particular religion or one particular ethnicity. I mean a culture of sanity, so that we don't have these divides. So we bring up the right-wingers, not because we think, like they do, that you should attack a particular group of people. That is nuts. Of course you shouldn't. What we're trying to say is, don't do that, right? Don't think in terms of who's a group I have to hate. Is it Muslims? Okay, then the Muslims are going to strike back, and then they're going to do this. And then you're going to hate them more, and then you're going to strike them. And then they're going to hate you more, and they're going to strike you. And on and on and on we go in a cycle of violence. Or we can change the culture to one of rationality and sanity. Now that's a long-term fix. It's not going to happen overnight. And I'm not saying kumbaya, yada, yada. Everybody praises the officer who shot him here. Alan Horujko responded immediately. He's a young guy, 28 years old, also went to Ohio State. He came onto the scene, and the guy was in mid-attack, and he shot him and perhaps saved lives. So we understand the need for that, no question about it. I'm not saying in the short term, go and give the guy a hug, he'll stab you to death. We're not idiots, we understand that. Like they really think like, oh, we're all tree huggers, and like, oh, there's a wild man killing people, let's go save him by singing around him. No, you make sure you detain him, and if you've got to do this, you do this. But in the long term, we've got to fix the culture of violence, because all it does is beget more violence.